Please take your seats. Our program will begin momentarily. As a courtesy to those around you, please silence your mobile device.
Well, the Cardinal, I think, trumps the press gal. If he's got to go, he's got to go, right? Oh, all right. Play another VO to please take your seats. I don't know. Whatever.
Please take your seats. Our program will begin momentarily. As a courtesy to those around you, please silence your mobile device.
Good morning. Welcome to the Parliament of the World's Religions, Conscience Plenary.
And VO6.
Please welcome American Prelate of the Catholic Church, a cardinal who serves as the 9th Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Chicago, Cardinal Blase Cupich.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome and warm greetings to you as we gather for this 9th convening of the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago, which is the birthplace of modern interfaith movement. The Parliament has long called Chicago home, and I'm grateful to participate in advancing the mission of this respected organization to cultivate harmony among the world's religions and spiritual communities. Thank you to Stephen Avino and the board of the Parliament for inviting me to address you. Today, we have come together to consider conscience and the role it plays in guiding us to act. Conscience formation has long been an important topic for spiritual writers and religious leaders. It strikes me, however, that conscience formation may never have been more vital to discuss than it is today. I'm encouraged that together we are doing so this morning. I highlight the word together deliberately. These past few years have been difficult for all of us. We've also become more aware that that of our interconnections with one another and our environment are so important. Technological advances allow us to speak directly in real time with people down the street as easily as with those on the other side of the world. This previously unimagined access to one another has been a gift, no doubt. Yet there are also some unfortunate dimensions of our newfound use of technology. For instance, it is very easy to seek out and talk with those whom we find most agreeable. Rarely or never listening to those who oppose our views can harden our positions. Moreover, through algorithms meant to keep us in touch with like-minded individuals and causes, technology has made dialogue across differences even less likely. We're also finding that those outside of our growing silos become easier to vilify and dehumanize as the others. They're no longer physically present to us. We have long moved far from Robert Putnam's depiction of bowling alone, and now we are surfing alone, being led to virtual spaces of common outlook and perspective by the very devices that provide us with the unmatched ability to connect with the world. Is the world at our fingertips, or are our fingertips narrowing our worlds? These reflections on our contemporary world are not meant to paint a bleak picture of our present reality or future prospects, but rather to underscore the vital need of gatherings like the Parliament of World Religions. As I look out on this plenary hall today, I see the diversity of the world. Religious and cultural differences do not separate us here today. In fact, they pull us together in an effort to conscientiously address the challenges we face in ensuring freedom, rights, and dignity for all. You testified loudly in coming together to a growing consciousness in our world that we are all interconnected. If we hope to advance the causes of peace and justice in the world, we must continue to seek out forums like this to connect with one another in recognition of our differences and diversity, and turn our awareness and concern into action. This morning's plenary centers on conscience. In 2019, conscience was identified as a key concern of Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed Al-Taib, in the jointly issued document on human fraternity. This is what they wrote. This declaration, setting out from a profound consideration of our contemporary reality, valuing its successes and in solidarity with its sufferings, disasters, and calamities, believes firmly that among the most important causes of the crisis of modern world are the desensitized human conscience, a distancing from religious values and prevailing individualism accompanied by materialistic philosophies that deify the human person and introduce worldly and material values in place of supreme and transcendent principles. Let me focus on the declaration's first core cause of crisis in the modern world, the desensitized conscience. To be properly formed, a conscience needs to be sensitized, to be aware of others and of all creation. The very word conscience means knowing together with, which implies that we have to look at the whole truth, the whole reality, which includes the voices of others, past and present. To sensitize our conscience requires us to admit that conscience is not formed in a vacuum. Conscience formation requires cultivating awareness and respect for others, but also learning from others by encountering them in the depth of their humanity. To be sensitized means to heed what Pope Francis wrote in Laudato Si, that Mother Earth now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted on her by our irresponsible use and abuse of the goods with which God has endowed her. We have come to see ourselves as lords and masters entitled to plunder her at will. The fifth directive of the global ethic, commitment to a culture of sustainability and care for the earth, articulates well the role that our religions and spiritual traditions have in hearing and responding with utmost urgency to caring for our common home. Whereas we live in a time that tries to focus our attention on individualistic and materialistic goals, our spiritual and religious traditions provide a rich resource to stand on sure ground and in the sure knowledge of our collective concern for one another's rights and dignities. Deeply principled, thoughtful, and spiritually grounded people in this room may disagree strongly about how best to achieve a more just and equitable world. At times, these disagreements can cause anger, hurt, and mistrust, but we must never fail and fall into the temptation to demonize and dehumanize those who disagree with us. As I look around this room this morning, I see the spark of the divine will and alive here today. This spark informs us and engages my conscience and urges me to redouble my commitment to defend and support the freedom of all. Thank you for your witness and the common concern. May we continue to create venues like the Parliament to enhance our interconnection. Let me conclude my remarks this morning by expressing my support for the Parliament of Religion's signed document. I was pleased to learn that it was signed and I was not able to be with you, but now I do so in a way of ratifying our commitment from the Catholic Church. Thank you.
Please welcome Professor of Asian Religious Traditions at California State University, Fresno, Dr. Veena Howard.
Good morning. The late Congressman John Lewis offered the highest praise to the Reverend James M. Lawson when he called him the architect of nonviolent movement of the United States of America. Reverend James Lawson was a mentor to Senator John Lewis. I feel honored that Reverend James Lawson counts me in his circle of close friends. In a recent conversation with me, the Reverend James Lawson Jr. reflected on the focus of 2023 Parliament, a call to conscience defending freedom and human rights. Lawson praised the Parliament for this theme, which calls on people of faith traditions and no faith traditions to defend precious freedom and human rights. He told me that in the United States, securing freedom and basic human rights required hard work, sacrifice, and defiance from millions of Americans against racist Jim Crow laws and other xenophobic and sexist systems. He reminds people to remain alert of the insidious structures of violence in what he calls racism, sexism, militarism, and plantation capitalism. These systems hold the power to deprive fellow humans of their rights, dignity, and freedom. As a civil rights leader, Lawson recalls that in the late 1950s and 60s, he held workshops in Nashville, Tennessee, for students from colleges in the surrounding areas. He taught them strategic nonviolence to fight segregation and violence through soul force and love force. The Reverend James Lawson, born in 1928, then a young minister, mobilized college students and some church leaders to test the method of the power of love, inspired by Jesus' love and Gandhi's nonviolent resistance movement in India. Lawson's strategic workshops and role-play trained and prepared students to confront segregation through sit-ins at lunch counters and other public places in Nashville, Tennessee. Lawson's nonviolent struggle became an exemplary model for a widespread acts of resistance across the US South. He told me that the nonviolent movement of America led to different kinds of liberties for people. The success of nonviolent mobilization energized people to work on issues relating what he called not just eradicating racism against Black people, but also to prison reform, immigration reform, environmental justice, and solving homelessness. The Reverend James Lawson's methods and message are timely, and they serve as a call to conscience to defend human rights and freedom. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the Reverend James Lawson, I quote, a great tactician of nonviolent action in the US South. In his sermon, Love in Action, Dr. King emphasized the power of Jesus' love, and he also warned against the forces of injustice and discrimination when he said, "We must continue to see the cross as the magnificent symbol of love conquering hate and light overcoming darkness. But in the midst of this glowing affirmation, let us never forget that our Lord and Master was nailed to the cross because of human blindness." Reverend Lawson, now 95, is going to, almost 95, is going to celebrate his birthday next month in September. He continues to teach next generations of activists, leaders through free public workshops, counseling, and his academic classes. He also warns against human blindness that concerned Dr. King, the threat of exploitation and injustice that is rampant around us. With his deep conviction, Lawson calls on his fellow people to use nonviolent methods strategically to confront violence and unjust economic and social structures that deprive fellow humans of their basic rights and dignity. Reverend Lawson told me that he really wanted to be at this parliament, but because of a health issue, his doctor advised him not to travel. He's with us in his spirit and will show a short excerpt from his video, 2022 video. Thank you so much.
So between 1953 and 1973, we had major campaigns year after year, thousands of demonstrations across the nation that supported it. We had folk in the Congress, folk in the White House, folks scattered across the United States who were beginning to formulate what the solutions are for change. The media makes a mistake when John is seen only in relationship to the Voting Rights Bill of '65. However important that is, you must not remember that in the '60s, Lyndon Johnson and the Congress of the United States passed the most advanced legislation on behalf of we, the people of the United States, that was ever passed. Head Start. Billions of dollars for housing. We would not be in the struggle we are today in housing if President Reagan hadn't cut that billions of dollars for housing, where local churches and local nonprofits could build affordable housing in their own communities, being sustained and financed by loans from the federal government. We passed Medicare. We passed anti-poverty programs, Civil Rights Bill 64, 65, voting rights bills, a whole array. John Lewis must be understood as one of the leaders of the greatest advance of Congress and the White House on behalf of we, the people of the USA. We do not need bipartisan politics if we're going to celebrate the life of John Lewis. We need the Constitution to come alive. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We need the Congress and the presidents to work unfalteringly on behalf of every boy and every girl, so that every baby born on these shores will have access to the tree of life. That's the only way to honor John Robert Lewis. No other way. Let all of us in this service today, let all the people of the USA determine that we will not be quiet as long as any child dies in the first year of life in the United States. We will not be quiet as long as the largest poverty group in our nation are women and children. We will not be quiet as long as our nation continues to be the most violent culture in the history of humankind. We will not be quiet as long as our economy is shaped not by freedom, but by plantation capitalism that continues to cause domination and control rather than access and liberty and equality for all.
Please welcome political activist, author, non-denominational spiritual lecturer, and New York Times best-selling author, Marianne Williamson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. What an honor to be here. And truly just hearing the words of James Lawson and all of the speakers, actually, both of the speakers that preceded him, I'm happy to have the chance to add my words into the deep listening that they have already created. I want to begin by telling a story, something that happened to me when I was probably 15 years old. I had gone to Sunday school, and after Sunday school, it would be on the Sabbath, Saturday, we're Jewish, and afterwards we would go into the sanctuary, and we would hear the rabbi's sermon. And I heard the rabbi speak out against the Vietnam War. And I thought, wow, temple can be relevant. Wow, religion can be like really lay it down. He's this cool man after all. And it really impacted me so much that I have never forgotten it. And a couple of days later at dinner, my mother made a comment to my father. And she said, "Ooh, I hear the rabbi's in trouble." My father said, "What happened?" She said, "Well, apparently at the service on Saturday, he came out against the Vietnam War. And a lot of people weren't very happy with that." And I learned a lot from those two incidents. What happened on that Saturday morning, as well as that conversation with my parents, showed me how the world works. We all know what conscience is. We all know that small, still voice for God. It is in all of us, except a very, very, very tiny percentage of the world's people who are apparently born without one. And the person who has no conscience is called a sociopath. A person who has no remorse or conscience or regret for shameful action is called a sociopath. There is such a thing as healthy shame. But what those of us who are religious clergy or leaders, or nonprofit leaders, or whatever other reason brings us here today, know the dirty little secret about how our country and our world operates. We have a socio-economic political system that mitigates against the real expression of conscience. It's one thing for us to say, oh, we need to care about the authoritarians who are at the door, and we do. It's one thing for us to say we have to worry about the strongmen and the fascists who are at the door, and we do. But what I believe is our greatest calling is to create a world where they couldn't even get that close to the door. That's the real problem. Franklin Roosevelt said that we wouldn't have to worry about a fascist takeover as long as democracy delivered on its promises. James Lawson was correct. You won't have to worry about the strong man as long as you feed that hungry child. You won't have to worry about the authoritarian as long as you make sure that people have health care, that people have food, that people have dignity, that people can work at one job. And when the Cardinal spoke about our worrying about environmental sustainability, boy, he's right. But every clergy person here knows how likely it is, in many cases, that if you get up on a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning or wherever your religious service is, and you speak about environmental sustainability, I know that there are people in this audience who would be told by a board member later, oh, you stay away from political issues now, because there are people who give money to this church or who give money to the synagogue or give money to this ashram, and to them it's all a hoax. In other words, ladies and gentlemen and everyone else, this is a Dietrich Bonhoeffer moment in history. This is a moment when it's not enough for us to say we really should be the conscience of the world. It's time for us to face how really hard that is in today's world. Have you really speak out as a nonprofit activist? If you really speak out as a religious leader, and I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if you speak out as a political candidate, the institutional resistance to our daring to suggest that feeding a child is more important than corporate profits, that poverty in the global South is more important than corporate profits, that humanitarian and democratic ideals is more than corporate profits. Ooh, you're a radical. And I would say that religion is radical. In today's world, if we are to honestly not only take it in as abstract concept, not only even take it in our hearts, but take it in viscerally in our gut, to really believe, to really stand, to really dedicate our lives to the idea that we must walk in mercy, we must walk humbly with our God, and we must love one another. is not to always be liked. The people pleaser in us must die in order for the genuine spiritual leader to live. In a world where unfettered vulture capitalism has come to dominate the way our nations operate, we are living at a time where repudiating that and rejecting that is the great social and, I believe, spiritual calling of our time. And if we do not take up that calling, there will be no keeping the fascists away. There will be no keeping the strong man away. If the people of Germany had not been so desperate, if there had not been great groups of desperate people, Hitler could not have been able to harness the power that he harnessed. As long as you have large groups of desperate people, you will have a fascist or an authoritarian or a strongman just licking their chops, waiting to come in. Because when people are desperate and people are damaged and people are vulnerable, they will go with anything that promises a better way. And so while one world is crumbling in our midst, another world is struggling to be born. And I believe that we are called to be death doulas to the old and birth doulas to the new. As spiritual and religious leaders, nonprofit activists, any of us who are called by the great religious wisdom of the world, we are here to testify and bear witness to the crucifixion and to bring forth the resurrection. We are here to testify, to bear witness to the agony of the suffering of the Israelites in Egypt, and to be the Moses consciousness which will lead the world to the promised land. This is not a time for sissies. This is not a time for lightweight spiritual platitudes. And this is not a time for religious hypocrisy. This is a time for each and every one of us to say, whether it was, as in my case, that I was lucky enough to hear Rabbi Malev, who did not lose his job, by the way, or we have been inspired by any other religious, spiritual, political, or social leader, let us be gone with any aspect of self or society that would shut us up. We are here to love one another, and we're going to stand on that. We're here to promote justice and mercy and love in our hearts for every man, woman, child, everyone, and for the earth itself. And whether the world appreciates it, whether the economic order appreciates it, whether the political order appreciates it, whether our donors appreciate it, or whether any other institutional reality mocks us, derides us, or seeks to obstruct us, our success lies in the fact that we can look in the mirror and say to ourselves, including on the last day of our lives, damn, I laid it down while I was here. Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. God bless you, everybody.
Please welcome Director Emeritus and Senior Advisor for Policy and Strategy, Rabbi David Saperstein.
To go from Marianne Williamson to someone with laryngitis requires special attention. I was asked to speak about what Judaism has to say about conscience. The central concept of traditional Judaism is that out of the covenant between God and the Jewish people at Mount Sinai flowed the Jewish people's obligation to observe a system of laws and commandments within a theological system that would become known as ethical monotheism, the belief in the one God who has called the Jewish people to righteousness, justice, and peace. But from the very beginning, there was an understanding that there was a moral sense, an ethical imperative within each person that flowed within the legal system and transcended it. The sense of right or wrong predates the Sinai covenant. Think of Cain and Abel, the evil of Noah's generation, the evil of people of Sodom and Gomorrah, and continue throughout history. To paraphrase Milton Convent's, the 20th century influential constitutional law professor, the heart of conscience is not a voice that speaks out of human beings. It is a hearing agency given to them so that they may hear the voice of God. Or, as the 20th century philosopher Martin Buber observed, conscience is that court within the soul which concerns itself with the distinction between right and wrong, and then proceeds against that which was determined as wrong. Conscience expresses itself in many ways in Jewish thought. I'm going to mention briefly, for time only 3. 1,500 years ago, the Talmud cites the biblical verse, "You should do what is straight and good in the eyes of God," as a source for the importance of acting on a concept known as lifnim mishurat adin, acting beyond the limits of the law, the line of the law. But what is the source of our understanding of what is good and straight in the eyes of God? The medieval scholar Nachmanides explains, the intention is to teach that while we must keep God's laws, we must institute what is good and straight in the many areas that the law can't address everything in life. It commands us always to do what is good and right. And the Rambam Maimonides, a famous medieval philosopher and legal authority, says that Jewish legal scholars should always act on the basis of lifnim mishurat hadin. Secondly, within Jewish thought, there was an idea that this is a universal norm conscience. Jews do not have a lock on the path to salvation or heaven to God. Anyone who believes in the one God and is an ethical, moral person has the same path to heaven. One of the reasons we've never been a missionary faith. Other faiths can bring people to understand what we believe God calls us to do. And later in history, at the time of the Orthodox philosopher in the 18th century, Moses Mendelssohn, and the non-Orthodox streams today, the belief simply that if you are an ethical person, you can be the righteous of the nations, applies to everyone everywhere. And finally, a sense of conscience beyond law and commandments. The many times in the Bible and the post-biblical literature in which people engage in civil disobedience against the law, or even in resisting God's word or God's law, and rather than being condemned by God, God commends it. Think of Abraham challenging as an immoral act God's willingness to destroy the innocents of Sodom. Or 2 examples involving courageous visionary women, one involving disobeying powerful human rulers, the midwives Shiphrah and Puah, resisting the Egyptian Pharaoh's command to engage in genocide against the Jewish people. And in the time of Moses later, the daughters of Zelophehad appealed to Moses at the law given by God, disenfranchising them when their father died solely on the basis that they were women was an unjust law. Moses consults God, and God instructs Moses to change that law going forward. We live at a time where conscience is needed more than ever, at a moment in human history when human rights and democracy and religion and political freedom are under such sustained attack. The moral call of the global religious community to stand for freedom and justice and peace is more compelling than ever. We are the first generation that produces enough food to feed every human being on earth. A failure to do it now is a failure of moral vision and political will. We are the first generation that can conquer malaria and an array of diseases that have plagued humanity from time immemorial. A failure to do it now is a failure of moral vision and political will. We are the first generation that can educate every child on earth, lift every person out of poverty, undo the damage to our environment if we act fast enough, spread freedom across the globe. For all of these, our failure to do so at this moment in history is a failure of moral vision and political will. But acting together Not only can we be more effective than any of us can be alone, but we are modeling the very world we are trying to create. And this above all, we are not the prisoners of the mistakes of a bitter and unremitting past. We can be, we must be, we will be the shapers of a better and more hopeful future for all God's children. Let that be the blessing of this great gathering. And truly, may that be the blessing of your work in your lives going forward.
Please welcome keynote speaker, strategic advisor and multi-award winning veteran journalist and news executive, Parisa Khosravi.
Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Humat, hucht, havarisht. These three principles are what we were raised and grew up with as Zoroastrians. Zoroastrianism originated in Iran and is one of the world's first monotheistic religions. Zarathustra was our prophet, and Avesta is our holy book. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Simple, yet profound and all-encompassing. Giving the right to every human being to make their own choices in life, the ultimate self-determination and equality with the personal responsibility informed by one's conscience. The focus of our plenary today is about the moral concept of conscience. In other words, every human being's innate ability to distinguish between right and wrong, choosing good over evil, and light over darkness, all of which are the most prominent concepts and major tenets emphasized in the Zoroastrian religion. Each one of us is impacted when wrongs are being done to our fellow human beings. As the Persian poet Saadi wrote in his famous poem, Bani Adam, the translation of which hangs in the halls of the United Nations. Human beings are members of a whole in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you've no sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. Saadi. We are all one, and as beings on this earth, when one suffers, the ripple effect of that suffering impacts all of us at some point or another. Sadly, in so many places, women are suffering and fighting for their basic rights. In the past year, we have been witnessing courageous women in Iran fighting for their basic human rights and so much more. Zan, zindagi, azadi, woman, life, freedom. I was a 13-year-old schoolgirl when the last Iranian revolution came to pass. In an instant, our world changed. Over 4 decades later, and as a former journalist who covered quite a few revolutions throughout my career, I watch with a mixture of pride, concern, and amazement of what is happening in my motherland. As I watch women of all ages, schoolgirls to grandmothers, bravely protesting in the streets, removing their headscarves, and showing their defiance while fighting and being faced with beatings, maiming, attacks in schools, imprisonment, and even death. Their courage and bravery is beyond anything we have ever seen. It is a revolution being led by women. The time has come for the free world to get up and walk the walk with the freedom-seeking women, men, and youth of Iran. Iranian women are showing the world what it means to be a shirzan, a lioness. 2 such women, Our journalists Niloufer Hamedi and Elahe Mohammadi, who have been in prison for their reporting on Mahsa Amini since last September. In the past year, dozens and dozens of journalists in Iran have been imprisoned, about a third of them women, making it one of the biggest jailers of women journalists in the world. The time has come for the global media to provide full coverage on this unfolding historic event in Iran. As a former news executive, part of my responsibility was the safety and security of our journalists who I would assign to report from different war zones or hostile environments. It is tragic to see journalists being jailed in their own country for simply doing their job. Iran is where Cyrus the Great proclaimed the first ever human rights charter. The first ever human rights charter came from Iran over 2,500 years ago. In its history, Iran has had women as kings, Turandokht and Ozarmindokht. They were both kings of Iran. They were not just a wife or daughter of a king. These women ruled and led as kings. By the way, these women kings, as was the case with Cyrus the Great, ruled during the Zoroastrian era in Iran. The founding fathers of the United States were inspired and influenced by Cyrus the Great as they wrote the US Constitution. The time has come for conservatives, liberals, and feminists to act in agreement together and in support of this singular nonpartisan issue of freedom. Freedom for Iranian women, freedom for Afghan women, freedom for Middle Eastern women, freedom for all women and girls around the world who are oppressed. Freedom to choose our path and freedom to communicate and express ourselves. I chose my path to become a journalist at a young age. To me, journalism was the ability to shed light on oppression and injustice. My joy and passion as a journalist was the opportunity to give voice to the voiceless. In my personal life, this has also become my quest, as I help to ensure individuals like my son, Payam, who's autistic and non-speaking, have their voices heard, and most importantly, listened to and not marginalized. For 14 years, Payam had essentially been trapped in his body and unable to reliably communicate. After endless efforts and therapies, we tried a method called RPM, Rapid Prompting Method. With the help of skilled and trained teachers in this method, Payam started pointing to an alphabet board and later a keyboard and spell out his thoughts one letter at a time into words and sentences. When we finally got a glimpse inside his thoughts, we realized he is wise beyond his years. I now dedicate my main focus in helping to bring about fundamental change in our perceptions and understandings of non-speaking autistics. Payam is not an exception. They're all capable of learning. I mention this as many of you in the audience likely know an autistic individual, and you can help to make a huge difference in their lives. Just because they don't speak doesn't mean that they can't think. As Payam wrote for his United Nations address, try to imagine what life, this is a quote, try to imagine what life would be like living without direct control over words, limbs, and motor actions. This way of living is all I know. But nothing is worse than being perceived as less capable than you truly are. My friends and I have dealt with this lack of honest understanding most of our lives, treating individual people as though they not only matter, but can make a difference in this world is essential. There must be fundamental changes in our belief in all of humanity. End quote. Payam. Payam is a big advocate for the rights of individuals who have any type of label put on them which limits their lives. He has presented at universities, United Nations, keynoted international conferences, and will soon publish his first book. You can watch some of Payam's presentations by Googling Payam Autism, P-A-Y-A-M space autism. I have lived a life full of experiences. As an immigrant due to a revolution, as a journalist for 3 decades directing the international coverage for CNN, and as a mother to a non-speaking autistic son. Our thoughts, be it an assumption about a neurodivergent person, our words, be it a comment on social media, or our actions, be it a decision made at work, all have ripple effects. Remember, human beings are members of a whole, and we can each create our own positive ripple effect with good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Thank you.
Please welcome founder of the Samaritan Legend Association and speaker on behalf of the High Priest of the Samaritan community, Yakov Cohen.
Good morning. Kiev Shem Shema Ikhra. In the name of the God I call, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, and all who yearn for a world filled of love, peace, harmony, and brotherhood. We gather here not as a separate individuals, but as a united force, driven by a common purpose, to bring about a world where peace prevails. As a son of the high priest of the ancient Samaritan, when I said ancient, it belonged to 3,658 years ago, from Mount Gerizim, a peaceful town that's shared by both Israel and Palestine. Today, we found ourselves in a unique role as a regular bridge of peace between Israel and Palestine, by having the top religious municipal leaders in my father's reception room to get blessing and advice how make peace. Our vision of a human right and dignity extend all borders, ideologies, and differences. To be a Samaritan, you must believe in the 10 Commandments, and when you believe in the 10 Commandments, you will respect all the human rights. We must extend our hand to those in need, irrespective of their background, and work toward building a bridge of trust and cooperation. We need a world where children can play without fear and families can embrace without tears. Let's begin truly coming together in our heart and mind to pray for peace in every corner in the world. May the light of peace shine upon those who are suffering, and may we work collectively to create a world where all people can live without fear and with dignity. Let us remember that peace begins within each of us and extends to the farthest reaches of the globe. Together, we can make a difference, fostering a world where love, empathy, and respect guide our action. Let there be peace in earth. Amen. Before I came here, the high priest asked me to perform the prayer of peace in his religious and holy clothes, and it's honor for me. I hope it's good in my head. I will pray in the ancient language. El Rab ulitika batel amini keliraemu el remanurata abode tabi'adil abatellam detireman طشيبات لشمك ربا ناثوالتي لا الله بيلك ربا نتيرث بلاوتك نجلك لتلاني رثان الله كلي دلي باري من عكيلا كيلوم والطائل قاني سوميا ورا صليت بروما وبمكة لالم دتيرمان وذميراتي ويايلي اليسوع ذيلي ونابيو إلوي وابي ورومي منيو شما جبري بما لما شما شمو ملي قولا ثانو أوارا وباين Thank you.
Please welcome the Venerable Abbot of Songshin Shaolin Temple, Abbot Yongxin.
Dear distinguished Chairman and dear Mr. Avino, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
公元495年，北魏孝文帝为安顿印度高僧巴托在天理之中嵩山，始建了少林寺。
In the year 495, the emperor of Northern Wei dynasty founded the Shaolin Temple at the middle, the sacred place between the heaven and earth, to accommodate the Indian eminent monk Bato.
少林寺是少林功夫的发源地，同时是禅宗主厅少林一宗的发源地。
Shaolin Temple is the birthplace of Chan Buddhism, as well the origin of Shaolin Kung Fu and the medical lineage.
1500年前，菩提达摩来到少林寺，面壁9年，首创禅宗，开启了外来宗教与本土宗教的对话。
Bodhidharma arrived at the Shaolin Temple and spent 9 years in meditation, establishing Chan Buddhism. That happened at 1,500 years ago.
少林寺1500年代代相传，影响了中国佛教及中国文化。
The transmission of Shaolin culture through generations over the past 1,500 years has greatly influenced Chinese Buddhism and Chinese culture.
其影响力影响了日本、韩国乃至世界各地。
Extending its impact to countries such as Japan, as then, Korea, and everywhere, even around the world.
少林寺开放交流、和谐共生的精神传承，不断在发扬光大。
The enduring legacy of Shaolin Temple's spirit of open communication and harmonious coexistence continues to thrive today.
和是少林文化的传承核心。
Harmony is the core of Shaolin Temple's culture heritage.
在少林寺，无论是建筑、壁画、塔林和碑刻，都体现了和为贵的精神。
Throughout the temple's architecture, murals, pagoda forest, and stone inscriptions, a prevalent ethos of valuing harmony is embodied.
这是中华文化最根本的东西，也是中华精神的精髓。
This ethos, deeply rooted in Chinese culture, constitutes the essence of the Chinese spirit.
寺院现存明代三教九流图碑，表达了三教九流、三教一体、九流一元、百家一理、万法一门。
The existing Ming Dynasty stone inscription at the temple, titled Illustrated Praise for the Three Teachings and the 9 Streams of the Supreme Ultimate, conveys the concept of unity among these 3 teachings, the convergence of 9 streams, the coherence of diverse schools of thought, and the integration of myriad principles.
三教九流图被誉为中华和谐图。
This philosophy of harmony is aptly referred to as the Chinese harmony chart.
和是传承少林精神的之轨。
Harmony serves as the spiritual essence of Chan Buddhism and Shaolin Temple.
少林寺在不同国家、不同种族、不同文化相处中，以开放圆融的态度，广结善缘，扶教扶学，与世界不同宗教交流福建，和与共。
In its interactions with various countries, ethnicities, and cultures, Shaolin Temple embraces an open and inclusive attitude, fostering positive relationships, harmonious coexistence, and cross-cultural exchanges with different religions around the world.
和体现了佛教的本质。
Harmony embodies the essence of Buddhism.
以禅为核心的少林文化，让我们与自己内心、与社会、与自然和谐共处。
The core of Shaolin culture, centered around Chan, encourages us to seek harmony within ourselves, with society, and with nature.
达摩祖师9年面壁，外息诸缘，内息不传，由内向外践行人与自己、与社会、与自然的万物和不二的共生之道。
Our patriarch, Bodhidharma, practiced meditation by facing the wall for 9 years without disturbance from inside and outside. He exemplifies the principle of harmonious coexistence in the inner process of uniting the individual, the human self, society, and the natural world.
佛教自创立以来，僧团和合共住，倡导六合敬精神。
Since the inception of Buddhism, the monastic community has stayed together in peace, advocating the spirit of six harmonies and reverences.
少林寺始终坚持延续1000余年的不变的少林僧团中华门头僧制度。
For 1,000 years, Shaolin Temple has consistently adhered to the unchanged Shaolin monastic lineage.
口传心授的师徒关系，六合敬处事方式，身心合一、天人合一的生活方式。
The master-disciple transmission through oral and mind instruction, the principles of six harmonies and reverences, the life ideal of integrity, mind and body, the sacred and secular. In addition, we also adhere to ideas such as peace for all nations, harmony in diversity, coexistence in harmony.
以及中华文化中和谐万邦、和而不同、和合共生、慈悲圆融理念。
Yeah, it's peace for all nations, harmony in diversity, coexistence as Chinese culture.
和是自然界最高次序，是人类追求最高境界。
Harmony is the highest order in nature and the loftiest pursuit of humanity.
和是以诚相待，不为本源，同心同德，使全人类通过自我与社会互动构建的有信赖的社区。
Harmony means treating each other sincerely, staying true to oneself, sharing common goals, and building a fiduciary community through mutual interaction.
和是相互尊重、平等互鉴、求同存异，通过全球文明对话而共建的和平。
Harmony implies mutual respect, equal learning from one another, seeking common ground while respecting differences, and building peace through dialogues among global civilizations.
和是理解包容、和和美美，人人皆能分享，处处皆能参与，共同构建的人类命运共同体。
Harmony also means understanding and inclusiveness. Harmony leads to happiness. It allows diverse civilizations to share and engage in the process of seamless coexistence without obstruction. It contributes to the construction of a community with a shared future for all mankind.
让我们自诚祈愿，世界和平，众生和乐。
With utmost sincerity, let us pray for world peace and the happiness of all beings.
祈愿各位六时吉祥。
And all happiness for all beings and all the tranquil time.
阿弥陀佛。
Hail to Amitabha Buddha, Amitofo. Thank you. And now, Abbot Master Shi would like to
我们带来
present
一份400年前少林寺碑刻拓下来的一份和谐图，献给大会。
400 years ago is a Ming stone inscriptions from Ming Dynasty, and we present to the Congress for the harmony for 3 teachings and 9 streams. Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome Director Chung Kong from the Director of Chung Kong Graduate School of Business, Dr. Jianbao Wang.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation of the Congress and especially Mr. Avino. I am invited to say a prayer on my own faith, Confucius. It's also known as Confucianism on the stage. So the first is the Western inscription. Heaven is my father, and earth is my mother. And even such a small creature as I finds an intimate place in the midst. Therefore, that which fills the universe I regard as my body, and that which directs the universe I concede as my nature. All people, all my brothers and sisters, and all things are my companions. Wealth, honor, blessing, and benefits are meant for the enrichment of my life, while poverty, humble station, and sorrow are meant to help me to fulfillment. In life, I follow and serve heaven and earth. In death, I will be at peace. Thank you very much. So, do not impose on others what you would not wish for yourself, taught by our master Confucius. For everybody. Good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Please welcome entrepreneur and founder of Awaken Now, Surbhi Pandya.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. What was your name? Thank you. Thank you so much. Tarina. Yes.
Jai Jinendra, everyone. The felling of a single tree on one part of the world disrupts the intricate dance of nature. As the tree's water vapor wanes out from the atmosphere, clouds hesitate to form, and rain takes a step back. The repercussions ripple outwards, devastating habitats and unsettling ecosystems. Who would have thought that the removal of just one tree could trigger such a cascade? Our world is woven together by countless threads of interdependence. Consider the power of our thoughts that we have intended, words we have spoken, and actions we have taken. Like a pebble in a pond creates ripples that reverberates through the microcosm of existence. This idea resonates with scientific revelations that stretch the boundaries of our understanding. Quantum entanglement beckons particles to dance in harmony, connected in ways that defy distance and logic. The internet and globalization underscore our global connection, revealing how a local event can shake the entire world. Neuroscience dwells into the core of our empathy. Mirror neurons paint a canvas of shared emotions, igniting sparks of understanding when we witness others' experiences. Jain philosophy encapsulates the essence of this interconnected symphony. Parasparo upagraho jiva nam sings of dependent origination, where everything springs from the harmony of causes and conditions. This world view paints us as harmonious threads, part of a cosmic fabric that transcends time and space. We are not isolated wanderers. We are notes in a grand symphony, entwined in the grandeur of existence. Jain philosophy also invites us to embrace the responsibility to respond in every fleeting moment, and invitation to be aware and be very attentive. This awareness is the beacon of consciousness within us, while alertness is the sentinel of conscience in each of our hearts. As our consciousness unfurls, our conscience begins to converse. It starts to talk. Consciousness is present in every living being. Though veiled by transient physical forms, this equal consciousness shines in each one of us. The qualities of supreme consciousness pulse within each being, illuminating the journey of life. This is the concept of Atma Swatantra, which whispers of freedom, the freedom to embrace our highest potential, shedding the shackles of prejudice and ignorance. The qualities of a supreme consciousness is present in everyone. Looking into each other's eyes with this perspective calls for a heartful social connectivity and respect. The different looks our bodies that we have are only the clothes of personal choices. There is no intelligence in being prejudiced about it. The sole responsibility of a consciousness is to recognize the presence of consciousness in everyone and allow symphony of social connectivity and respect to unfold. So, from the grandeur of cosmic entanglement to the felling of a single tree's demise, the web of interconnectedness is ever present, awaiting our recognition. Each thought, each word, each action, each a drop, a ripple, a wave in the vast sea of existence. And as we recognize this symphony of connectivity, we embrace our role as harmonious participants in the grand dance of life. All of us are together in this. If we are to examine any of the big issues that we are facing today, be it global warming, poverty, terrorism, apartheid, or the crisis in Palestine, all of it boils down to how individuals behave in an unconscious and unaware manner. It is upon all of mankind to take individual leadership to be aware of our conscience and thus function from an elevated level of consciousness. Thank you so much for hearing me out. Jai Janet.
Please welcome Harvard College student Tarina Ahuja.
This is not normal. Seeing our brothers and sisters and siblings struggling at the hands of the Maui wildfires. This should not be normal. seeing transgender kids all across the country being targeted by their governments and schools. This cannot be normal. Seeing Venezuelan migrants in this city struggling to find access to food and housing. This cannot be normal. I was having a conversation with my little cousin the other day, and we were on the phone, and she was playing, and she stops and says, "Tarina, Didi," the word for sister, "why are people mean?" That stung, but I responded instinctively and said, "My love, that's just the way the world works." And immediately, I regretted it. Because often when we're confronted with the terrors and cruelty of the world, we tend to think that's just how it goes. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can choose love and kindness and action instead of choosing hate, contempt, and complacency. In fact, I am positive that every single person in this auditorium, in fact, every person in this entire McCormick Center has made that choice before. But for some reason, we have been sold this narrative that this cannot be the norm of our global community, that this cannot be the norm of human nature. And I am here to tell you that that just isn't true. Now, when I think about our ability as human beings to choose goodness, I think about an experience I had about a year ago when I was at the March for Our Lives in DC. In the middle of the speeches, we hear a boom, and immediately we panic because we thought we were under attack. Thankfully, it was a false alarm. But I remember seeing kindness and care in those moments that will always be ingrained on my soul. I saw people take the hands of complete strangers and guide them through the crowd. I saw others stay back and put themselves in harm's way to try to help somebody that had been injured while trying to run. I saw other people embrace others that they had never met because they were left crying in shock after everything occurred. We chose goodness. We looked out for one another. And this is what's encapsulated by the Sikh ideal of Sarbatapala, which translates to prosperity for all or blessings to everyone. Every single day, twice a day, Sikhs pray to Vaheguru, God, in a prayer called Ardas, for the entire world to have Sarbatapala. For everyone in every corner of this planet to be treated with dignity, to be safe, to be well. My friends, our world is in crisis, a crisis of conscience. We are at a once-in-a-generation crossroads where we're seeing problems of health, of housing, of inequality, of injustice converge to create lived experiences of pain and suffering for our fellow human being. And we cannot accept this as spiritual leaders or as human beings. And so it's up to us to move, to take action. Now, every single one of us, we are here today in the McCormick Center because we believe in the power of change and action and progress. But the difficulty lies in the question of trying to understand how do we take the energy that we've created here and move it beyond us? How do we take our resolve to act and move it beyond us? How do we get others to listen to their own conscience and move it beyond us? In my organizing work, I found 3 ways to do this. Number 1, make people feel seen. Now, oftentimes in our lives, when we choose malice, we do it because we feel alone or misunderstood. But I promise you, when you show somebody your light, you inspire them to act upon their own. Sophomore year of college was difficult for me. I was adjusting to being on campus in person for the first time. I was dealing with anxiety, and I had just lost my grandfather, and at every turn I was questioning myself. I have this vivid memory of walking to class one day, and being the klutz that I am, I dropped everything in my bag. And a kind stranger comes up to me with the warmest smile and helps me get everything together. And before I could even refuse, she puts a breakfast bar in my hand and tells me that she hopes I have a day full of joy. And this was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me because it reminded me of the goodness that surrounded me. And it reminded me that I can choose goodness every single day of my life, in my work, in my life, in my relationships. Number 3, and this might be the most important one, make action accessible. Now, oftentimes, we see so much happening, and as a youth organizer, I have tried every single day to engage other young people, and what I have found is that more often than not, people want to act but don't know how. And this is where entry points come into play. We have to make action accessible. We have to give people links to Action Step. We have to give people meetings to go to learn how to get involved. We have to call them on the phone and meet them in the streets and tell them our stories and why they should get involved and how they can get involved. Never assume that somebody doesn't care, but instead give them the chance to care. And more than that, give them the tools to act upon that care. Now, the final step that I want to talk about in this idea of making conscience realized is the idea of looking into our neighbors and being vulnerable, making the abstract personal. When we look around us, sometimes it's easy to get numb. We hear broad sweeping statements and statistics, and as jarring as they may be, sometimes we still find it hard to act. And so this, my family, is where we have to talk to people, share our stories, share our experiences, share our feelings, and share our pain, as hard as that might be to do. Because experiences are different between all of us, but emotions are universal. And feelings are where we discover our own conscience. Now, if you would, join me in taking a second to close your eyes. And I'm looking at all of you, so please take me up on this and close your eyes. And imagine what the world can look like 5 years from now, 50 years from now, 500 years from now. You can open. Those worlds that we're imagining, they're radically different between us, but we all have a part in building that future. Because let me tell you something, we deserve a future where our planet is protected. We deserve a future where everybody has access to health care and to dignity. We deserve a future where every single one of us, no matter the color of our skin or the God we pray to, is treated with dignity and kindness and compassion and empathy. We deserve that world. And so, if you would, repeat after me. I vow to myself, I vow to my community. The future we imagine will be our reality. Now, I'd like to end with a Sikh prayer. Nanak naam chaddi kala, tere paane sarbata pala. Nanak, with God's name comes eternal optimism, and with your blessing comes prosperity for all. Thank you so much.
Please welcome Integral Chair for the study of Imam Al-Ghazali's work at the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque and Al-Quds University, Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. God wants us to know each other. to serve each other and to respect our differences. A theology of loving one's neighbor is sublime, but it needs a theology of justice as infrastructure, as a prerequisite. The following verse reflects the antithesis of Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations and Fukuyama's The End of History and the Last Man. O humanity, we created you from a male and female and made you into peoples and tribes so that you may know each other. Surely, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous among you. Allah is truly all-knowing, all-aware. It is attributed to Ali ibn Abi Talib, may God be pleased with him, that he said, people are either your brothers in faith or your brothers in humanity, and of course, sisters in faith and sisters in humanity. This talk is about the nature of human rights in the Islamic worldview, not about the practice of Muslim societies. Of course, as much as these wonderful minutes permit, the primary sources are the Holy Quran and the prophetic Sunnah, the prophetic traditions, along with the consensus of the scholars and analogical reasons. The lawgiver is God, and the role of scholars, qua law keepers, is to understand and present the law to the best of their knowledge. The latter also means that Muslims have differences with other faiths and traditions. Even when the people of the book preserve their original revealed law, the Quran stipulates that God has ascribed a law that is unique to each in certain areas. We have revealed to you, O Prophet, this book with the truth as a confirmation of previous scriptures and a supreme authority on them. So judge between them by what Allah has revealed, and do not follow their desires over the truth that has come to you. To each of you, we have ordained a code of law and a way of life. When it comes to the laws of the Torah, there are cross-references to them in the Quran. Regarding the law, it is more of a Judeo-Islamic tradition rather than, as Louis Massignon put it, Judeo-Christian, a construct that fails to show that Christians abolished the law of Moses early on through a reinterpretation of Jesus Christ's nature, peace be upon him, as fulfillment to the law to the degree that it is not required of his followers. This despite Jesus Christ pledged to uphold the law, both in the Gospel and in the Quran. It is worth noting that the etymological origins of halakha in Hebrew and sharia in Arabic are identical. On the other hand, shared commonalities in the belief in Jesus Christ, peace upon him, despite the serious differences, are not shared with Judaism at all. The contemporary Abrahamic religion's construct serves its own pragmatic political purposes. Abraham was a recipient of divine revelation and scripture, and was not the source of any of these religions himself. We also share the same challenges coming from a positivist worldview. Without the transcendental outlook, it could lead to nihilism and an end to the revealed sense of normativity that existed for millennia. The way forward is respect to the fundamental right to be different and convivencia without coercion. Let there be no compulsion in religion, the Quran says. It is not the intention here to offend anyone. Do not argue with the people of the book unless gracefully. إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. The human being was created to fulfill the role of Khalifa. This is not the political office that emerged historically after the death of the Prophet, peace upon him. It is understood in the story of Adam's creation to act positively upon the God-given universe without shedding blood and causing corruption on earth. The human being was given language to facilitate this life, to worship God and to serve humanity. Language is important to understand the revealed message, for humanity was not left to its own to decipher its role and way of life. God honored, dignified, and ennobled all the children of Adam in the Holy Quran, and it is imperative to uphold this dignity. This is an essential human right. This entails respect for all races, colors, tongues, that is, languages, the profound categories of female and male, and the coexistence of the various religions and creeds. This is an essential part of the Islamic faith, to believe in the previous prophets and to confirm their original revealed messages. As for the colors and tongues, they are signs pointing to the wisdom of the Creator. Tolerance, the original use of which entails endurance with pain, falls short. They are to be celebrated. And one of his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your languages and colors. Surely in this are signs for those of sound knowledge. The Prophet, peace upon him, confirmed this solid anti-racial position in his farewell address of Hajjat al-Wada'. All humans are descended from Adam. There is no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, or of a non-Arab over an Arab, and no superiority of a white person over a black person, or of a black person over a white person, except for piety, righteousness. The Prophet, in the same farewell address, reminded his nascent community of women's rights, that men should be kind to them, that their marriage took place in the light of divine permission and trust. Muslim women have the right to be financially independent 1400 years ago, and that within marriage her wealth remains hers, and her husband shoulders the responsibility for all financial upkeep of the family, unless she freely and willfully decides to contribute. A woman has the right to inheritance as a mother, daughter, or wife. She inherits the same, less, more, and in some cases she inherits and the man does not. She has the right to participate in every sector in the society. The practical prophetic practice was such that the house chores are genderless, for he patched his own clothes, fixed his own shoes, was tidy, and in one tradition, he used to do at home what his family did. Thank you.
Please welcome native rights activist, environmentalist, and actress, Camp-Horinek.
Gatia, Judy with the Panka, but the Manchete Panka, Oklahoma. Judy is my true name. Casey Camp is my colonized name. I want to acknowledge first that we are here on stolen land of the Odawa, of the Ojibwe, of the Potawatomi, and like to ask you all to recognize that first and foremost. And if my sister Mary Lyons and her daughter are in this hall, can you please stand for us? If she's not here, she snuck off for some lunch and I'm real jealous. Next, I want to acknowledge all of the indigenous people of Turtle Island. Would you stand, please? This is also to remind you how few of us are participating. You should wonder why. Want to ask those indigenous peoples of the South Americas who are the caretakers of the rainforest to stand, please. And to the sacred water herself, the actual host of all humanity and all living things. I thank you and I love you. It's an interesting thing as a Ponca woman. P-O-N-C-A, for those of you who want to look it up. We are originally from Nebraska, called Nebraska now, the land of the flat waters in our name, forcibly removed to the occupied territory of Oklahoma when my grandfather was 6. And we live there now, thanks to the Wichita people, the Caddo people, and other tribes that were there before us. We want to say thank you and acknowledge that. Wakanda, the Great Spirit, the one who has given life to all in the way of the Ponca people, is our way of acknowledging spirituality, not religion, not organized religion. I respect your belief. I also ask for your respect for our belief, because the doctrine of discovery allowed you to steal this land, to defile the sacred water, to genetically modify the sacred corn, to massacre the buffalo, to imprison the salmon. The very breath of the four winds has been killed by your pollution. But Wakanda, the Great Spirit, which is the spirit of all living things, not just humans. You talk about human rights. What about the rights of those without the same voice as you and I? What about the rights of the deer to have healthy offspring, to have clean water, to have air to breathe, to have generations to come? What about the rights of the buffalo? What about the rights of the butterfly? What about the rights of the finns? What about the rights of the water? What about the rights of the air? What about the rights of the Father, Son? What about the rights of the Mother Earth? We are interdependent. We who are born with these huge, stupid egos that blind our eyes, that believe that money is the answer to the next thing. Your religion, my spirituality, your way of accepting money by using banks that are invested in fossil fuels, by using insurance companies that back them, by believing that those who are elected to office are the leaders, will kill our species, because none of it matters. If our Mother Earth continues her purification in the manner that she is right now, with the bigger tornadoes, with these huge hurricanes, with these floods, with the fires, those are her ways of sustaining life. So with your religion, with your human rights, with your freedom, what will it mean if Earth herself isn't honored? The mother of all, the one mother we all share, the Father, the sky, those that walk on four legs, those that swim, those trees that breathe as we breathe, are a shared way of being. We are visitors. We're temporary. One day, the Ponca understand that we will be in the Hulaga, that great circle of stars in the sky. And when we arrive there, because we've got no heaven, we've got no hell, we have now. And then we have then. And then we go to this camp circle where all our relatives are waiting, those in the spirit world. And I would remind you that the spirit world's a polite world. And unless we humans humble ourselves and ask for help, they're not going to intercede, because they are in that higher conscience that we are seeking. Because they have the understanding, and until our oneness includes truly all things, all living things, there is no future for humankind. But I believe in you. I believe that you're going to expand yourselves to include folks like me, to rescind the doctrine of discovery that has allowed you to kill me, that has erased the value of women, who have looked at the 7 generations to come and say, oh no, I'm just taking care of me right now. Who have looked at the sources of life as resources. Take that RE off there. Every time you hear that, it's not natural resources. Those are nature, following natural law, and they are sources of life that we must all respect. We must all show gratitude for. I embrace you for what you believe. I do not embrace how you believe. When it comes to the life of the 7 generations to come, I ask you to take responsibility, to move away from those oligarchs of the fossil fuel industry, to empower the guardians of the Amazon, to look to the indigenous wisdom that kept this portion of Mother Earth in harmony until 500 years ago. We do have answers. I'm counting on you to just accept that simple philosophy of praying for, providing for, and making sure that the 7th generation from now will have clean food to eat, will have clean water to drink, clean air to breathe. Be on the right side of history. Let your future ancestors look back and say, my folks were there at that time they called climate change, that the indigenous people called purification. And they did everything possible for us to live as one with the Mother Earth and the Great Spirit.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rainn Wilson. I am an actor, writer, and producer from Los Angeles. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm also an author of a few books. I have a deep and abiding passion for discussing spiritual topics. I'm a member of the Baha'i faith, which, as you may or may not know, has its very origins in North America, sprung from the Parliament of World Religions. So it is a sincere honor to be speaking to you remotely today. I wanted to bring up a couple of ideas. You know, when we people of faith gather, when we discuss social transformation as well as personal transformation, these ideas are not just a nice, sweet side hobby. The world needs what we have. The world needs right now the deep and abiding faith-based wisdom of the ages that come from all of the world's great religions. And we need to share this wisdom in a hurting world. We've just gone through a pandemic, obviously the COVID pandemic, but when you look around, you see that there are many, many pandemics everywhere. Racism is a pandemic. Sexism is a pandemic. Income inequality is a pandemic. Materialism is a pandemic. Militarism and nationalism. All of these diseases that are affecting humanity right now. And on a vaster, more global scale, climate change is a pandemic. And deepest and most difficult of all are the diseases of despair, loneliness, anxiety, depression, and suicide and suicidal ideation. The mental health epidemic has young people in its clutches like at no other time in human history. And we, people of faith, have some answers. We have some solutions to these issues. These are issues that have their origins in a spiritual disease, in a spiritual malady, in a spiritual imbalance. These are not pandemics that will be cured with legislation. They won't be cured by one political party or another. They won't be cured by some policy decisions. And they won't be cured simply through protest. We have a tendency in contemporary America, at least, to begin and end with protest. We see an injustice and we protest about it. And I think one of the important things that the faith traditions can help with, can lead the way, can show the way forward, is in building something. We can build something. We don't just protest. We roll up our sleeves and we get into the grassroots of it all. We serve in the communities and we bring people together and we build community, we build cooperation and consultation. So let that be our standard moving forward, not just an act of protest, but an act of building something positive. Religion has a bad rap in the world right now, especially in the Western world. And a lot of religions have committed quite gross, corrupt injustices. But religions also have within them a shining lamp of purity, of compassion and kindness. And we can build unity together, all of us, people of faith, no matter what background, country, or class or creed we come from. A couple other spiritual solutions to the world's problems that we might want to consider is we can provide joy and hope. This is a land and a world of pessimism, of despair, and we can give people hope. And that's what they need. They need hope, vision, purpose, and mission. We can provide that in the teachings of the great spiritual traditions. And as we know we are spiritual beings having a human experience, we can share that concept with people and see one another as beautiful, vibrant, radiant souls that are in a period of a great turmoil. You know, there's two forces at work in the world right now, the forces of integration, and there's some great movements bringing people together like this parliament, and there are forces of disintegration, forces that are tearing the world apart and making the world a better place. For a lot of young people, they get very confused by this, by these two twin forces at work on the social fabric at the exact same time. So we can show them to turn their gaze away from the disintegration and toward the integration, find the hope, find the upliftment. So there are so many tools that we can use, building community at the grassroots, inspiring hope, and reinventing the adversarial systems that tear us apart. The systems at work in the world today, and I mean all the systems, the biggest systems, government, agriculture, healthcare, education, politics, you name it, every system is built in an adversarial way. And this is part of the reason that we're destroying our planet and the fabric of our society is unraveling, because we live in these adversarial systems that have ideas like one-upsmanship, and it's a dog-eat-dog world, and every man for himself, this kind of toxic individualism that is at play. And again, we people of faith, we humble servants of humanity, people who put service toward the disenfranchised at the top of our priority lists, we can start to address these imbalances. And again, these imbalances are not simply going to be fixed with more or different legislation, because the systems themselves are so very broken. So there's a lot of big ideas to wrap our heads around. We have a lot of great reasons to be meeting, to be consulting, to be loving one another, to be working side by side, shoulder to shoulder, sleeves rolled up on the ground, not just talking about big ideas, but putting those into practice and doing something about it. So again, I wish I could be there. These are just a couple of ideas I wanted to throw out. Keep what you like and leave the rest. I hope it leads to some powerful consultation, and I can't wait to hear what comes out of this glorious, vibrant, magical parliament. Just a beautiful garden of diversity there in Chicago. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. See you next time. Bye.
Please welcome violinist Sirena Huang. Please welcome Religion and Family Life Resource Teacher and the coordinator of the Interfaith Youth Alliance Movement, Audrey Ferrer.
Good morning. I'd like to acknowledge we are gathered on the ancestral land and waters of the people of the Council of Three Fires, the Ottawa, the Potawatomi, and the Ojibwe nations. We also recognize we are on the shore and waters of Lake Michigan, which was a site of trade, travel, gathering, and healing for more than a dozen other Indigenous nations, including the Menominee, Michigamea, Miami, Kickapoo, Puyallup, and Ho-Chunk nations. Let us strive to respect the dish with one spoon wampum. That is, take only what we need, leave some for the rest, and protect creation. And finally, let us honor and acknowledge the contributions and the enduring presence of all Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island. So I've been invited here to share the winning essay for the Global Ethic Essay Contest Award, and it's titled Engaging Youth in the Global Ethic. And I'm just going to preamble that with, this really was meant to be read as text as an essay, but you're going to hear it verbally, so just keep that in mind. As a Catholic high school teacher in the Greater Toronto area, my heart sometimes breaks when in dialogue with the younger generation. Our students are struggling with post-COVID trauma and grief, anxiety about the climate crisis, and systemic discrimination. After graduation, they will face high unemployment rates and the lack of affordable housing. They witness through media the growing division and violence between groups. It is no surprise they have lost hope, searching for meaning in their lives. The global ethic, with its 5 directives, can act as a guide for youth to rediscover purpose, spiritual fulfillment, skills development, and build a collective conscience. The global ethic can engage and empower youth to make transformative changes that address the urgent needs of our communities on issues that matter to them. I would like to share the example of an issue that students say is of major importance in Canada, that of truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Although I was born in Manila, Philippines, I moved to Canada when I was 2 years old. While I am not personally responsible for the historical oppression and cultural genocide of Indigenous peoples in Canada, I understand that I am a settler and I benefit from their land that was taken hundreds of years ago. And although I was not responsible for the Indigenous children who were stolen away from their families by the Canadian government, I know I am responsible for addressing the wrongdoings that happened. To do so, I can try to uphold the global ethic in my teaching practice. That is, I can commit to its 3rd directive, promoting a culture of tolerance and life of truthfulness. By highlighting the abuse of Indigenous children that took place in residential schools and how 60% of these schools were run by Catholic-affiliated organizations. As a Catholic, this is a painful part of our religious heritage and history. But I can challenge my students to critically examine how and why abuse was possible. It was an arrogant sense of righteousness, with no heart to listen and learn from others, that made it possible for individuals to commit crimes against innocent children and for a nation of bystanders to let it happen. Beating the Indian out of the child for spiritual and cultural salvation sprang from a colonial culture of intolerance and ignorance. In short, we must adopt a stance of humility in recognizing that no single religious or cultural group carries the whole truth, and there is rich wisdom in learning from each other. If only we had listened from the heart, we would have seen the global ethic reflected in indigenous teachings and seen their own connection to our own faith. Once learning is embedded in a life of truthfulness and culture of tolerance, it is easier to focus on the other global ethic directives. For example, one of the impacts of intergenerational trauma is the issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Students understand the importance of the fourth directive and its commitment to a culture of equal rights and partnership between men and women. They have advocated for the police and government to address the thousands of girls and women who have been murdered or disappeared these past decades without serious investigation or justice. Another issue that has drawn the attention of my students is that of treaty rights and of defending land and water. Though the second directive calls for a culture of solidarity and economic justice, the government and companies gain economic profit by destroying sacred territories while Indigenous communities suffer devastating loss. For example, it is heartbreaking to hear the Anishinaabe First Nation speak of their lived experiences in Grassy Narrows, a community whose water was contaminated with mercury poisoning, resulting in high incidences of cancer. It's also difficult to believe their community was on a boiled water advisory for 48 years. This is Canada. To top it all off, the provincial government is planning to begin mining operations in Grassy Narrows' traditional lands without even consulting them. They are only one of many Indigenous communities whose lands and lives are being threatened. I just want to add, as an aside, since this essay was submitted in March, and since then, because of pressure with the government, they agreed to hold off on building roads for mining for the next decade. So that's a victory. As a mother and teacher, listening to stories of their youth struggling with anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation, I cannot imagine how overwhelming it must be. Yet, I witnessed the hope, strength, and resilience of Indigenous peoples who continue to fight for the rights and well-being of their land and people. This is where the global ethic helps direct the work we can do in a practical and meaningful way. Taking its third directive to heart, we can take a stand with Indigenous peoples in solidarity, asking for a just economic order and protesting in a way that is non-violent. In the past, I've witnessed youth moved by such issues. They act as co-conspirators, echoing Indigenous voices to demand justice for Indigenous communities. By demanding that the government meet with First Nations to protect land and resources, youth play a role in helping promote a culture of sustainability and care for the earth, as the global ethic directs us to in the fifth directive. Youth have found creative and nonviolent ways to stand in solidarity through organizing letter writing and social media campaigns, building pipelines of hope in front of the parliament, employing visual arts, music, drama, prayer, vigil services, marches, solidarity dinners. In their campaigns, youth have developed a wide array of skills: planning and organization, communication, budgeting, civic engagement, technology, even cooking. The list goes on. Most importantly, they learn they can make a difference and affect positive change in line with the first directive by creating a culture of nonviolence and respect for life. Thus, using the global ethic directives to help guide youth on specific issues can be a helpful and empowering way to provide hope and resolution for problem solving and community building. As the next generation, we must invest in our future. To conclude, I challenge you with this personal and possibly professional question for reflection. How are you providing opportunities for youth to learn about and live out the global ethic? Let us be very intentional in creating the space and time to do so. Thank you.
Please welcome Taoist priest from Taiwan, Shu-Ming.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest with us today. He is a Taoist master from Taiwan who has dedicated his life to the ancient and mystical traditions of Taoism. He is here to share with us his wisdom and insight on how to live in harmony with nature and ourselves. He will also demonstrate the Orthodox Taoist blessing ceremony, a sacred ritual that invokes the power and grace of the Tao. This ceremony will bless each and every one of you with peace, health, and prosperity. How amazing is that? Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Shu-Ming.
眼开，多定波作天尊，多定波作天尊，高定波作大天尊，天地有莲灰气混散，东地用天苦红龙太阳八方为是。苏我主莲林波湖边破过九天天头大那东宫台，斩妖波下多归万千中山新九万世有闻其雄一边求兵言安宁我家八海的文梦所修是为我献求为小山多去中尊中心中亲天尊雄亲雄亲天尊雄亲雄亲天尊即心归命嘞宏观六天团挂高主修经我多这多困没破为众心小度在就巴西的花山高做树代主代比求可求难3万多种观求天有也所作天公八界有还大众今天祖孙金木灵验后爹灵庆连着今年下文清君地势好行有福寿星显天上帝金花花心动魔大天尊，无万无万相救的为只用妙丹，何跑来无客有客下仙班。kim chiêng hiền cao đại thiên尊siêu hiếu hiền độ siêu hiền độ有天极尊金苦啊，有红兄弟，修用向多。三平三观大德，修行向多。 亲笔闲谈论坛，宏伟美国芝加哥麦考密克广场湖滨中心，奉道修斋，就谢消灾解厄，延伸之忧，请福吉庆保安，折华弟子，在会众弟子人等，今逢世界宗教议会日，诚心祈求大地风调雨顺，赐福苍生安康，天下太平和谐。请在会弟子和众人等，天恩广施，大仕途男女信众，命运亨通，财源广进，愿成光彩，世路则指日益高升，吉星与高照祥光，四时无灾，八节有庆，万事如意，南征北赴，女纳前祥，学道精进，传道顺遂，大将吉祥成。行为道中师派法师吴高官，自仅外表上言，天问岁是辛卯年7月初1日己旦，呈外表上言。万数万点破过万点拉到金冠头的纪念走下有节不跌梦见会用尽的雷为点千个安红为必修丹田太雄有兵所不下境后啊星光不为安定不一代的万劫力尽太行万数安定天尊太行万数安定天尊大行万数安定大天尊。好问。Thank you very much.
Numberless people of all regions and religions strive to live their lives in the spirit of partnership and responsible action in the areas of love, sexuality, and family.
Nevertheless, all over the world, there are condemnable forms of patriarchy, domination of one sex over the other, exploitation of women, sexual misuse of children, and forced prostitution. In the great ancient religious and ethical traditions of humankind, we find the directive, you shall not commit sexual immorality or respect and love one another.
No one has the right to degrade others to near sexual objects, to lead them in or hold them in sexual dependency. We condemn sexual exploitation and sexual discrimination as one of the worst forms of human degradation.
Let no one be deceived. There is no authentic humanness without living together in partnership. Your relationship between humans should be characterized not by patronizing behavior or exploitation, but by love, partnership, and trustworthiness.
The social institution of marriage, despite all its cultural and religious variety, is characterized by love, loyalty, and permanence. All lands and cultures should develop economic and social relationships, which will enable marriage and family life worthy of human beings. We need mutual respect, partnership, and understanding instead of patriarchal domination and degradation,
which are expressions of violence and gender counter-violence. We need mutual concern, tolerance, readiness for reconciliation, and love instead of any form of possessive lust or sexual misuse. We invite all people, whether religious or not, to do the same.
The Parliament of the World's Religions calls all people, religious or not, to commit themselves to the values and principles of a global ethic. The Parliament also calls for people all over the world to signal their support for the global ethic by signing it. To show your support or to learn more, visit our website at www.parliamentofreligions.org/global-ethic-signatures.
Please welcome Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of St. Louis and Trustee of the Parliament of the World's Religions, Rori Picker-Nice.
Good afternoon. My name is Rori Picker-Nice, and I'm honored to serve as part of the Board of Trustees here at the Parliament, to work on behalf of our entire St. Louis Jewish community as Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council, and to serve as a member of the clergy in my tradition of Orthodox Judaism. My community is not one that has widely accepted the ordination of women. And since stepping into my role, I have experienced people walk out of the room when I start to speak. Faith leaders refuse to participate in programs if I would appear next to them on stage. Colleagues print public letters of condemnation against me repeatedly. Search committees tell me that my application would never even be considered. All of these only because I am a woman who seeks deeper learning, a woman who teaches others how to become closer to their own faith. My friends, I wish that women like me, as we come together in this convening to wrestle with the dangerous implications of climate change, the perilous threats to our democracy, the overwhelming need of migrants and refugees, and so much more, I wish that women like me, that women like us, were truly the greatest problem facing our faith communities. But the stories that I described pale in comparison to the horrors that so many face. The abuse and violence, exploitation and sexual abuse that countless women, non-binary, and transgender people encounter on a daily basis. But here's the thing. When we ridicule and demean women and those who are non-binary and transgender, when we perpetuate the idea that one has to be born a particular gender in order to access the wisdom of our own traditions and the path to the divine, we make our faith communities instruments of abuse, perpetuating not only systems of inequity, but creating structures in which the powerful few can corrupt our ancient wisdom, create false dichotomies, and manipulate those who are already marginalized and abused in our societies. And once we allow those ideas to take hold, or worse, once we create those ideas, we become powerless to control their reach, and we bear the responsibility for all the harm done in our name and beyond. Friends, let us commit ourselves to answer this call to conscience. Let us commit ourselves to this culture of equal rights and the unmitigated partnership between all sexes. Let our faith communities forge the path towards mutual respect, partnership, and understanding, mutual concern, tolerance, readiness for reconciliation, and love. And may we all merit to witness a world made stronger, healthier, and holier because of all the people embraced and empowered within it.
Please welcome a performance by the Jain dance group Sargam.
Jai Jinendra.
Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, distinguished delegates, and honored guests.
It is with great pleasure that I stand before you today to introduce our group Sargam and the act that we brought together to introduce one of the world's most ancient and profound spiritual traditions, Jainism. As we gather here at the World Religion Parliament, a forum that celebrates the diversity of human beliefs, we believe that delving into the essence of Jainism will undoubtedly enrich our collective knowledge for the tapestry of human spirituality. Jainism is more than a religion. It is a way of life that emphasizes nonviolence, compassion, self-discipline, and a profound reverence for all forms of life. One of the fundamental principles of Jainism is ahimsa, nonviolence, that extends to not only refraining from causing harm to other living beings, but also a cultivation of a mindset that the universal call for peace and harmony amongst the global community. We have tried to represent this with our act as it starts with the greatest mantra of Jainism, the Naukar mantra, seeking blessings from all the divine beings, and goes into explaining the true essence of Jainism, as well as the true bliss that the soul experiences by following Lord Mahavira's teachings. We thank the Jain Society of Metropolitan Chicago to bestow us with this amazing opportunity and for their strong belief in us throughout. Now, without taking much of your time, with God's grace and all your love, we present to you Sargam, Music of the Soul.
असंख्यता है चौगति भ्रमण वहाँ है मोक्ष ढाई द्वीप से आर्य भूमि से सदा अरिहंत जन्मते जहाँ वो 15 कर्म भूमिया असीम सी खुशी वहाँ है धर्म साधना वहाँ
नमो अरिहंताणम नमो अरिहंताणम पुरुषों में सिंह सम लोक में उत्तम चरण अंगूठे ये मेरु कंपाए सिंहासन डोलता है इंद्र का भी होते जब प्रभु के कल्याणक तनननदुम 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 ताना देर तेरे ना चारों दिशाएं झूम के गाए कानों में जैसे कोई मुरली सुनाए अंबर से कोई नाद बजाए तेज हवाएं जोर से गाए रंग उड़ाए इंद्राणी मिल मंगल गाए सीप में जैसे कोई सागर पाए ढोल नगाड़े शंख गुंजाए अंबर अमृत रस बरसाए मेघ घटाए शोर मचाए भाव क्षमा का हर दिल में खिला हो जैसे ईर्ष्या जलन और बैर का कोई अंत हुआ हो जैसे खुशियों की एक बात छिड़ी हो जैसे दिल से दिल की बात हुई हो जैसे फूल खिले हो जगमग जगमग दीप जले हो जैसे तारे खुद धरती पे गिरे हो जैसे धरती है दुल्हन सी सजी हो जैसे शाख के पत्ते झूम रहे हो जैसे मध्यम मध्यम जैसे कहीं जुगनू ज़मीं पर आए जैसे कहीं चांदनी जगमग जगमग रोशनी लाए जैसे कोई मीठी सी लोरी सुनाए जैसे कहीं कोयल राग में गाए जैसे कोई वीर का जन्म मनाए कैसी मीठी वाणी थी वो वीर की कहानी थी जो कल्प सूत्र में अब मैंने जाना है वीर को पाना है वीर की धुन में ही राग लगाना है महावीरा निजा 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 धनी नि धनी नि धनी बदन 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 गम बदन नि सा निजा सा सा निजा धनी नि नि धनी बदन 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 गम बदन नि सा 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 गम ग ग गम म ग ग ग बदन नि द ब म ग नि सा गम म म द नि द द द नि सा 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 ग रे सा नि द ब म ब द सा नि द म ग सा नि द नि सा ग म द नि सा नि सा नि द म ग सा ग म द सा नि द म ग सा नि सा ग म नि द म ग सा ग म द म द नि सा नि सा नि सा नि सा नि सा ध नि ध नि ध नि ध नि ध नि ग म ब द नि द ब म ग म ब द नि द ब म ग म ब म ग म ग रे सा रे सा नि ध नि सा ध ध नि नि सा सा ग ग म ग सा सा ग ग म म द ध नि द ध नि सा ग सा नि ध नि सा नि ध नि द ब म ग म द नि सा ध नि द म ग म ग रे सा नि ध नि सा ग म द नि सा नि द ब म ग म ग रे सा नि सा ग म द नि सा नि द ब म ग म ग रे सा नि सा ध नि नि सा सा ग ग नि नि सा सा ग ग म म सा सा ग ग म म द द ग ग म म द ध नि नि म म द ध नि नि सा सा ध ध नि नि सा सा ग
कलयुग के महाकाल में सतयुग है जिन शासन दुष्कर्मों की आग में मिगदार है जिन शासन प्रेम करुणा भाव में जगमाता है जिन शासन इतिहास के महापन्नों पर अमर जिन शासन
वंदे 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 शासनम जिन शासन शासन जिन शासन शासन वंदे 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 शासनम जिन शासन शासन जिन शासन शासन
दीन जनों के तुक सागर में नाव जो बन कर आवे सुख शांति की दिव्य ध्वजा को अंबर पार लगावे विश्व के महाप्राण की सुख आस है जिन शासन धरती के दबकार की चिरसास है जिन शासन पाप भरे अंधियार में तेज सूरज है जिन शासन अशरणम शरणम सुख कर है परम जिन शासन
वंदे 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 शासनम जिन शासन शासन जिन शासन शासन वंदे 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 शासनम जिन शासन शासन जिन शासन शासन
Thank you for coming to the Conscience Plenary. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day at the Parliament of the World's Religions.